Hello everyone and welcome back into the GSMC Dead Ball Sports Podcast, and for our final segment of today's show, we transition to the world of baseball, talking about the top 5 MLB prospects to look out for in 2025. Well, maybe not for some of these guys because some are a little bit more raw than others in this top 5, and potentially their farm systems are a little bit too loaded to really differentiate who to call up when. But I do think that these are some of the guys, when you look at some of these loaded farm systems, you could expect to see in the next 2 years be called up and play significant minutes. Well, actually, I don't know why I made a basketball reference there. Or get significant time in the majors over the next couple of years. So without further ado, let's just jump right into them. Really exciting list. Really excited to present these players to you to monitor. If you're a fan of any of these teams, let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think about these guys and how they profile in terms of when they'll get called up. But let's just jump right into it. Starting off at number 5, perhaps the rawest prospect on this list, Carson Williams of the Tampa Bay Rays at the shortstop position. And early comps, he's looking kind of like an early career Trevor Story and a later career Dansby Swanson, if you can picture that at the shortstop position. But the reason why I call him a little bit more raw than some of the other guys you'll see on this list is because there's a lot of swing and miss in his game, and now he's become more of a power over hit guy. But he does profile at an elite level defensively at the very least, and I feel like in a Rays team that does invest a little bit more in homegrown talent than others, and most importantly, invest in them not just necessarily as elite players, but certainly as utility players as well. That's where we could see Carson Williams really shine, when he's out there in the field as a utility guy. Not necessarily always staying in the lineup at any given moment, just, getting in there potentially to get you a couple of hits, but potentially to shore up defensively as well. So I do feel like he's an interesting prospect to look out considering how the Rays use a lot of their talent, but I would expect him to hover around the AAA ranks for another year or so, because there's a lot of depth for the Rays at the position with Taylor Walls and Jose Caballero, so I wouldn't expect to see his face this year specifically. But he is an interesting player to get to know. Also could have profiled as a pitcher. He sat in the mid-90s of the mound for quite some time, coming from the 2021 MLB draft class. I feel like, though, because of his abilities as a defensive shortstop, he added more muscle, gained more power, and tried to add a little bit more hitting to his game. So we're going to see how it all translates, putting that power over hit potential to the test, and also combining it with the plus defending. So it all makes for a very interesting player, but I don't necessarily know what the timeline is for him just yet because of how deep the Rays look in terms of their farm system, especially in an AL East known for producing a lot of young talent through their farm systems, because this is not the only AL East prospect on this list. So that's all you should know about the AL East there, but Carson Williams, fascinating prospect in terms of his potential. Then at number 4, this is another exciting AL East guy here in Marcelo Meyer, another shortstop here, and his ESPN comp is a lankier lefty Willy Adames if it all clicks, and I could see it. He's gonna hit more for average than, say, a Carson Williams, and I feel like he is also someone who can profile as an elite defensive prospect as well. But I do feel like in terms of actually putting that power to use, Meyer profiles a little bit better than Williams. And so I do feel like in terms of his timeline, we could see him on the field as soon as this season rather than Carson Williams' projected timeline, just because of his steady improvements. For example, his chase rate was down 3%, his swing rate was down 3%, and his exit velos have been just steadily going up, which is always a good sign that you want to see from these talented prospects. But I do feel like, in terms of as to the reason why he's ranked a little bit more highly than a Carson Williams, is because of that timeline. And he also grades a little bit better, I believe, than Williams in terms of defending at the position. He's very rangy, very flashy, has elite arm strength, and most importantly, I feel like the power that we see from him can produce home runs rather than Carson Williams' power, which is more so hitting for average. So that's why I feel Marcelo Mayer ranks a little bit more highly right now than Carson Williams, and has a faster timeline attached to him than Carson Williams as well. I'm really excited to see him. He could have been a little bit higher on the list, but with the talent in the Red Sox farm system, you would have to think that because of that, a lot of people find it hard to grade these guys and try and rank them as a result as well. So that could potentially be why such a talented player is sitting at number 4 on this list. But let's get into who is number 3. A Minnesota Twin here in Walker Jenkins, who's an interesting prospect, the first right fielder, first outfielder on this list. ESPN comps kind of like J.D. Drew. And this is a guy who's going to be a smooth hitter, very athletic feel for the position. He is going to really pop in terms of how his power translates to the field, rather than say, always hitting home runs. I feel like the reason why he's ahead of Meyer is because he's a little bit more well-rounded. He can get you not just home runs, but hits, and play the level that you want him to in the outfield as well. And I feel like his big selling point is as a hitter because of his bat skills, and I feel like he's going to be in the Meyer range in terms of home runs, but I feel like the way he plays the game offensively, combined with his power, is interesting to watch, because he's the only one where scouts are saying he's a fantastic runner, instinctual on the pace pass, and his versatility really pops out to a lot of teams. He can likely move around in the infield, not just seen as a right fielder, and I feel like when you look at the two players before him, they're confined to the shortstop position a little bit more than a guy like Walker Jenkins. So it's this wide range that makes Walker Jenkins very appealing. In terms of his kind of timeline, a lot of people are saying that this is a guy who in many different drafts would have been the top overall pick and could have a fast-track path to the major leagues and be the top prospect in baseball in the next 12 months. So, not necessarily, at the level of Marcelo Mayer in terms of making the big leagues, but still someone who is definitely going to appeal to a lot of people in the Twins fan base as a very smooth, level-headed player with high upside athleticism both offensively and defensively. And most importantly, more versatility than the two players who preceded him on this list. So it's going to be interesting to see how he pans out. But let's get into our second Red Sox prospect on this list in Roman Anthony. And this is a guy who can be volatile in terms of how we comp him compared to Colton Cowser or Kyle Tucker, no matter what you see in this game. But I feel that the two prospects from the Red Sox on this list are all about power. And I don't mind that, but it's quite telling when you are seen as a prolific hitter and not necessarily the best at your position defensively. And that's kind of what I want to see a little bit more out of from these two guys. But Roman Anthony is still a fascinating prospect because he projects as someone who, as a lefty, can hit with a lot of power, can get over the 30-plus range in terms of home runs, and ultimately can fast-track his path to the majors. I feel like he can play many different positions in the outfield as well, so his versatility rivals that of Jenkins behind him. And I just feel that the reason why people might be more compelled to look at him a little bit ahead of a guy like Jenkins is because of the power. It's not necessarily a big selling point in my personal opinion, but I do think that it's big if you're, say, projecting him for the next 5 to 10 years. And because of his fast track, I do think that he has potential to make it to the major leagues ahead of a guy like Jenkins, who they're still saying could be the top prospect within the next 12 months, which means that he would still be in the minor leagues instead of, where Roman Anthony could be in the next couple of games. But that's what this league is becoming, right? A power-friendly league. And that's what basically Roman Anthony is all about. But I don't necessarily think he's better than perhaps the most versatile prospect of all time, who should not necessarily be on this list, but is because of his prowess. Roki Sasaki. And we'll be very brief about him because we talked about him all offseason. But technically, he is an international amateur. That's how the Dodgers signed him, because of when he made himself available. So technically, if the Dodgers see fit to put him in the minor leagues, why wouldn't they? To improve his game. He already has plus splitters and sliders, and a lot of people could say that he could beat MLB teams with that stuff alone. But if you view him as a prospect, then that could mean that the Dodgers saw that he could make adjustments to his game as they see fit. He still doesn't necessarily have the best of velocity. In fact, that has regressed to the mean for him. So that could be something the Dodgers look into. But overall, if you view him as a prospect, he is projected to be the number one overall prospect. That will just about do it for today's show. Thank you all for tuning in to the GSMC Dead Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. I've been your host, Christopher Shepard. Thank you all for tuning into today's show. We'll be back here tomorrow to conclude the week. See y'all then.